At a fancy restaurant, the waiter quietly handed me a napkin with a message. "The woman with your husband is not his sister." I glanced at their table. She was feeding him dessert. I walked over, smiled, and said one sentence that made my husband's face go white and her run to the bathroom in tears. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The waiter's hand was steady as he placed the small plate before me. His fingers, just for a moment, brushed the edge of the linen napkin folded underneath it. I looked up, ready to thank him for the olive tapenade, and saw his eyes. They were not the blank, professional eyes of a server in a place like this. They held a distinct, urgent sympathy. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the napkin, then turned and walked away. The background chatter of the restaurant, the soft clink of silverware, the low hum of curated jazz, it all receded into a distant roar. A coldness spread from my fingertips up my arms. I looked down. The white napkin was folded into a neat square. With a calm I did not feel, I dabbed the corner of my mouth with my own napkin, then let it fall to my lap. My hand reached for the one beneath the plate. It was slightly damp, chilled from the air conditioning. I unfolded it under the table. The words were written in a hurried, slanted script in blue ballpoint ink. "The woman at table 14 is not his sister. I've seen them here 3 times. I'm sorry." I did not gasp. I did not drop the napkin. I carefully refolded it along its original creases and placed it in my lap, covering it with my own. My heart was a hard, heavy drum in my chest, but my breathing remained even. I took a slow sip of my sansera. The crisp citrus taste had turned thin and sour. I knew where table 14 was. It was along the far wall, partially obscured by a decorative wrought iron partition, a coveted spot for privacy. My husband, Marcus, had told me he was having a working dinner with a difficult junior associate who needed mentoring. He had said he might be late. I had decided to treat myself to a quiet dinner alone with a book. The opulent bistro was his favorite, not mine, but its bar was reliable and the lighting was good for reading. I marked my page and set the novel aside. I took another deliberate sip of wine. Then I turned my head, as if casually surveying the room. There he was, Marcus. His back was mostly to me, but I knew the set of his shoulders in that charcoal suit jacket, the exact shade of his close-cut hair. He was leaning forward, his posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been at home in months. And across from him was a woman, Chloe from his office. I knew her from the firm's holiday party. She was laughing, one hand touching the base of her throat. Her blonde hair was perfectly smooth. The waiter, Gabriel according to his name tag, approached their table with 2 dessert plates. A rich chocolate torte. Marcus smiled, a genuine, easy smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I watched as Chloe picked up her dessert spoon, scooped a bite, and extended it across the table. She held the spoon in the air, a playful, intimate question. Marcus didn't hesitate. He leaned in and took the bite from her spoon. He closed his eyes for a second as he tasted it, then said something that made her laugh again, her head tilting back. It was the intimacy that shattered the last pane of glass, not the clandestine meeting. A working dinner could be lied about. It was the shared dessert bite. It was the familiarity of the gesture, the comfort in it. It was a version of my husband I had not been shown in a long, long time. A strange clarity descended upon me. The coldness solidified into something sharp and usable. The roar in my ears quieted to a precise, focused silence. I observed them as a scientist might observe a foreign species. I noted the way his hand rested on the table, close to hers. I noted the empty bottle of Bordeaux between them. I noted the flush on her cheeks. I signaled for the check. When Gabriel brought it, I paid in cash, leaving a generous tip. I stood, smoothing the front of my simple black dress. I picked up my book and my purse. I did not look at the napkin in my hand. I began to walk, not toward the exit, but across the dining room. My heels made a soft, definite sound on the polished concrete floor. I walked past tables of people absorbed in their own conversations. I was a woman crossing a room, nothing more. I felt the weight of the folded linen in my palm. I stopped at the edge of their table. The partition was beside me. Marcus was mid-sentence, his hand gesturing. He saw my shoes first. His eyes traveled up and his words died. His face underwent a rapid transformation, confusion, then a flash of recognition, then pure, unadulterated panic. His skin paled. Chloe followed his gaze. Her smile froze, then melted into a slack-jawed stare. Her eyes darted from me to Marcus and back. "Elise," Marcus breathed. He started to push his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. I did not speak to him. I looked at Chloe. I held her gaze until her eyes dropped. Then I turned my attention to my husband. I felt the napkin, crisp and accusatory, in my hand. I did not throw it. I did not slap him. I placed it, slowly and with purpose, on the table between them, right next to the half-eaten chocolate torte. "Your waiter thought you should have this," I said. My voice was quiet, flat. It did not shake. "He seems to be under the impression you've been lying to your wife." Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Chloe made a small, choked noise. Her hands fluttered to her face. I looked at Marcus for one last long second. I memorized the sheer terror in his eyes, the sweat beating at his temple. I gave a small, cold nod, then I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I walked past the host's stand, through the heavy door and out into the cool evening air. The city sounds rushed in. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing. I still held my book. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond on my wedding band caught the light from the bistro's sign. It looked like a piece of costume jewelry, a prop. A taxi was idling at the curb. I got in and gave my address. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window. I did not cry. I unfurled my fist. The napkin was a crushed white ball in my damp palm. I rolled down the window and let it go. It fluttered for a moment in the wake of the car before disappearing into the dark. The taxi ride home was a silent, moving capsule. I watched the city lights blur past the window, my reflection a pale ghost superimposed over them. I felt nothing but a deep, resonant hum, like the aftermath of a large bell being struck. My mind was not racing. It was still a frozen lake. I replayed the scene at the bistro in crisp, clinical detail. The panic in Marcus's eyes, the napkin on the table, the chocolate on the spoon. Each image was a data point. I collected them without emotion. The driver stopped in front of our building. I paid him and walked through the polished lobby. The night doorman, Joe, nodded. "Evening, Mrs. Thorne." His voice was the same as always. The world had not shifted for anyone but me. I gave a slight nod in return, my face a calm mask. Our apartment was on the 12th floor. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a space waiting for a performance that would not happen. I placed my purse and book on the console table. I walked into the living room, not turning on the main lights. The ambient glow from the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows was enough. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it slowly, standing at the island. I looked at my left hand resting on the marble countertop. The wedding band and engagement diamond caught the dim light. They felt alien. I slid them off. The skin underneath was pale and bore a slight indent. I set the rings down on the cold marble. The sound they made was a small, definitive asterisk click asterisk. Then I began to move with a methodical purpose. I went to the guest bedroom closet and retrieved a large hardshell suitcase. I wheeled it into our master bedroom. I did not look at the bed. I opened Marcus's side of the closet. The smell of his cedar sachets and wool suits filled the air. I started with the basics: underwear, socks, t-shirts from the drawers. I folded them neatly and placed them in the suitcase. I selected a week's worth of suits, dress shirts, and ties. I added 2 pairs of dress shoes and his running sneakers. From his bathroom, I gathered his razor, his cologne, his toothbrush. I placed them in a leather toiletry bag and zipped it shut. I did not include the monogrammed towel set my mother had given us. I did not pack the framed photo from our wedding on his nightstand. I packed only the functional, impersonal items a man would need to live elsewhere. When the suitcase was full, I zipped it closed and stood it upright by the front door. I placed his briefcase, which he had left by the console that morning, next to it. The tableau was clear: a departure. My phone began to vibrate in my purse. I walked over and looked at the screen. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. It vibrated again immediately, and again. On the 4th call, I picked up. "Elise, my God, where are you? Let me explain, it's not what you..." His voice was a ragged, panicked stream. I cut him off. My voice was even, quieter than usual. "Come home, we will talk here." I ended the call before he could respond. I powered off my phone and placed it on the charger. The silence returned. I changed out of my dress into a simple pair of linen pants and a sweater. I made a pot of tea. I sat in the living room armchair in the dark and waited. I did not cry. I did not pace. I sipped my tea and watched the headlights of cars trace lines on the distant highway. The frozen lake inside me began to harden into something more solid, more strategic. I heard his key in the lock 47 minutes later. The door opened and closed. He stood in the foyer, a silhouette against the light from the hallway. I did not get up. "Elise," he whispered. He flipped the switch, flooding the room with light. I blinked, my expression unmoved. He looked terrible. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled. His eyes were wide and red-rimmed. "You packed my bag," he said, his gaze landing on the suitcase. He took a step forward, then stopped. "Please, let me explain. Chloe, it was a mistake. A stupid, one-time mistake. It meant nothing. I love you. I'm so sorry." He was reciting lines. I could almost see the script in his mind. Appear contrite, admit fault, minimize, reassure. I set my teacup down on the side table. The china made a soft sound against the wood. "How long?" I asked. My tone was that of a doctor inquiring about symptoms. He flinched. "What?" "How long has the affair been going on? I would like an accurate number." He ran a hand over his face. "It's not an affair. It was a lapse, a few weeks, maybe 2 months, but it's over. It ended tonight." I nodded slowly. 2 months, and the dinners at the opulent bistro, the weekend business trip to Napa in January, the late nights at the office when your phone location was conveniently unavailable. His face went slack with shock. He had not expected me to know specifics. He had expected tears, shouts, a messy emotional storm he could navigate and eventually calm. He was not prepared for this cold audit. "How did you?" he stammered. "That is irrelevant," I said. I stood up. I was calm. I walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. I looked at him, this man I had shared a bed and a life with for 8 years. I felt a distant ache, but it was buried under layers of ice. "Here is what will happen now. You will take your suitcase and you will leave. You will not contact me unless it is through my lawyer." I turned and retrieved a business card from the console drawer. I held it out to him. "This is Alina Vance. She specializes in divorce. She has been on retainer since the day your sister started texting you after midnight 6 months ago." The color drained completely from his face. The prenup. He remembered it then. The ironclad agreement his own family's lawyer had insisted upon to protect their son from a woman with lesser assets. I had signed it without argument. Now it would protect me. "The prenup," he whispered, "is ironclad," I finished. "You receive what you brought into the marriage. You keep your future earnings. I keep the apartment, my business, and my dignity. You will find the terms are very clear." He stared at the card as if it were a venomous snake. "Elise, please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling." I shook my head once. "There is nothing to fix. You broke it. I am simply disposing of the pieces." I walked to the front door and opened it. The hallway light streamed in. "Take your things and go." He didn't move. He looked from me to the suitcase to the open door. His shoulders slumped. The charming, confident facade crumbled, leaving behind a scared, middle-aged man facing consequences. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, the words hollow. "But you did," I replied. My voice was like polished stone. "And I hope the chocolate torte was worth it." A choked sound escaped him. He moved then, slowly. He picked up his briefcase, then wheeled the suitcase toward the door. He paused on the threshold, looking back at me, perhaps hoping for a last-minute softening. I held the door open, my face impassive. After a moment, he stepped into the hallway. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt with a firm, final click. I leaned my back against the cool wood and listened to the sound of his footsteps fading away down the hall, followed by the distant hum of the elevator. Then there was only silence again. It was a different silence now. It was mine. I stood against the door until the silence was no longer an absence of sound, but a tangible presence. It filled the apartment, heavy and watchful. I pushed myself away from the wood and walked back into the living room. My teacup sat on the side table, half full and cold. I picked it up and carried it to the kitchen. I poured the tea down the drain, rinsed the cup, and placed it in the dishwasher. Then I began to walk through my home. It was a forensic walk. I observed details I had stopped seeing years ago. The abstract painting we bought on our honeymoon in Santa Fe. The sleek, uncomfortable chaise lounge Marcus had insisted on. The coffee table book about modernist architecture that was purely for display. I moved from room to room, turning on every light. The apartment was a beautiful, sterile stage set. It did not feel like a home. It felt like a collaboration that had just been dissolved. I stopped at the entrance to the master bedroom. The door was open. The king-sized bed, meticulously made with high thread count linens, dominated the room. It looked vast and empty. I had not slept alone in this bed in 8 years. I walked to my side and sat down on the edge. I placed my hands on my knees. I looked at Marcus's side. His nightstand held a charging cable, a book on leadership he never finished, and a glass of water from the morning, now warm. I did not touch it. I stood and went to my jewelry box on the dresser. Inside, nestled in a velvet slot, was the plain platinum band I had worn before my engagement. I took it out. I walked back to the kitchen to the marble island. My wedding ring still sat there, a small, glittering pile. I picked up the engagement ring first. I studied the diamond. It was an excellent stone, brilliant and clear. Marcus had been so proud of finding it, of its specifications. It had never felt like me. I placed it back on the marble. Then I picked up the wedding band. It was simpler. I slid the plain band onto my left ring finger. It fit, a little looser than before. I picked up the 2 rings he had given me and put them in the pocket of my linen pants. I returned to the bedroom. I opened the closet and looked at Marcus's side. It was half empty now, gaps like missing teeth where his favorite suits had hung. My clothes occupied the other half. I took a deep breath. Then I began. I pulled every remaining item of his from the closet, the out-of-season sweaters, the formal wear, the shoes he rarely wore. I made a pile on the floor. From the dresser, I emptied his socks, his gym clothes, his spare pajamas. I gathered his toiletries from the bathroom. Half-used bottles of expensive face cream, hair product, a spare razor. I went to the storage closet and found empty moving boxes. I brought them to the bedroom and began packing his belongings. I did not fold them with care. I placed them inside, filling the boxes efficiently. When I was done, I sealed them with packing tape. I wrote MARCUS on each box in large black letters with a marker. I dragged the boxes one by one to the front foyer, stacking them next to the door. They formed a wall, a barricade. I was sweating. I went to the kitchen and drank another glass of water. My body was tired, but my mind was clear and hollow. I walked back through the apartment, turning off the lights as I went. I left only a small lamp on in the living room. I sat in the armchair again. I looked at the wall of boxes. I thought about calling someone, my mother, a friend. But I did not want to talk. I did not want to hear the shock, the pity, the questions. I did not want to perform my grief for an audience. The grief itself was a private, quiet thing. It was not tears. It was a cold, heavy stone settled in the center of my chest. The night deepened. I did not move to the bedroom. I could not imagine lying in that bed. I pulled a throw blanket from the back of the sofa and wrapped it around myself. I watched the lights of the city. I thought about the bistro. I thought about the waiter, Gabriel, his face, his act of risky kindness. He had seen me, a stranger, and he had chosen to hand me the truth. In that moment, he had been the only honest person in the entire restaurant. I thought about Marcus's face when I said the lawyer had been on retainer. The dawning horror as he realized I had known, or at least suspected, for longer than just that evening. I had planted that seed deliberately. Let him wonder. Let him question every interaction, every quiet moment from the last 6 months. His confusion would be its own punishment. A faint, gray light began to seep around the edges of the window blinds. Morning. I had sat there all night. My body was stiff. I stood up, folded the blanket, and walked to the kitchen. I made coffee. The routine was automatic, grinding the beans, boiling the water, the slow pour. The smell was familiar and comforting. I took my mug to my home office, a small room with a large desk and a monitor. I woke my computer. I opened my email. There were 17 messages from Marcus, sent throughout the night. The subject lines progressed from "Please talk to ME" to "Elise, this is insane" to "We need to discuss the apartment." I did not open them. I selected all and marked them as unread. I opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Actions." I began a list. 1. Change passwords on all joint accounts, bank, utilities, cloud storage. 2. Call Alina Vance to formally initiate proceedings. 3. Change locks. 4. Separate finances. 5. Inform landlord of marital separation. I stared at the list. It was logical, it was manageable, it was a plan. The heavy stone in my chest was still there, but now I had something to build around it. I took a sip of coffee. It was strong and bitter. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars began to move. The world was continuing. I closed the document. I had survived the night. Now I had work to do. I worked through my list with a mechanical efficiency. I changed passwords. I sent a formal email to Alina Vance, attaching the signed retainer agreement from 6 months prior. I called a locksmith and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Each completed task was a small stone placed on the heavy weight in my chest, not lifting it, but creating a stable foundation around it. By noon, the apartment felt like a sealed chamber. The wall of boxes in the foyer was a stark boundary. I needed air. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't filled with the artifacts of a failed collaboration. I put on my coat and left, stepping over the threshold without looking back. I walked without a clear destination. The late autumn air was crisp. I passed cafes where people laughed over brunch, couples window shopping, a man walking a dog. The normalcy of it all was jarring. My feet, however, seemed to have a destination in mind. They turned a familiar corner, away from the main commercial drag, onto a quieter street lined with older brownstones. I stopped in front of one with a faded green door and a brass knocker shaped like an owl. Beatrice's house. Beatrice was my neighbor, but more accurately, she was my anchor in the neighborhood. A retired literature professor, she had welcomed me when Marcus and I first moved in 5 years ago. She had brought over a tart lemon cake and a first edition of a Zora Neale Hurston novel as a housewarming gift. "For the shelves," she had said, her eyes twinkling. "Every home needs weight and wisdom." Over the years, our relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm of occasional tea, book recommendations, and shared observations about the neighborhood's changing character. She was sharp, unimpressed by pretense, and possessed a calm, observational wisdom I had always valued. I had not seen her in a few weeks. I lifted the owl knocker and let it fall. After a moment, I heard shuffling footsteps. The door opened, and Beatrice stood there, clad in a deep purple cardigan over a rumpled linen dress. Her silver hair was in its usual untidy bun, and her glasses were perched on the end of her nose. She took me in, my face, my posture, the plain band on my finger where my rings had been. "Elise," she said, her voice warm but without surprise. "Come in, the kettle's just boiled." I followed her into the living room. It was, as always, a glorious chaos. Books were stacked on every surface, piled on chairs, lining the floor along the walls. The air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the faint, sweet scent of whatever herb was steeping in the pot on the sideboard. Rain had begun to patter against the large bay window. Beatrice cleared a stack of journals from a worn velvet armchair. "Sit," she instructed. "I'll get the tea." I sat, enveloped by the chair and the quiet disorder of the room. It was the antithesis of my sterile apartment. This was a space lived in, thought in, asterisk felt in. Beatrice returned with 2 mismatched china cups. She handed one to me and settled into her own chair with a soft sigh. "Now," she said, taking a slow sip, "you look like you've seen a ghost and decided to evict it. Tell me." The directness was a relief. There was no need for preamble, for softening the truth. "Marcus is having an affair with a woman from his office," I said. My voice was flat. "I saw them together last night at the opulent bistro. He was letting her feed him dessert. A waiter slipped me a note. I confronted him. He's gone. I've initiated divorce proceedings." Beatrice listened, her intelligent eyes never leaving my face. She did not gasp or offer empty condolences. She nodded slowly. The opulent bistro, how tragically predictable, and the dessert, a vulgar, performative intimacy. She set her cup down. "How are you?" The question was simple, but it sought the truth beneath the facts. I considered it. "I am functional. I am angry, but it is a cold anger. It is useful. I am also very sad, but the sadness is quiet. It feels like a private fact, not an emotion to perform. Good, Beatrice said, a note of approval in her voice. You are separating the injury from the infection. The injury is his betrayal. The infection would be allowing it to make you bitter or small or vengeful in a messy, self-destructive way. I want vengeance, I stated plainly. But I do not want to scream or throw things. I do not want to become a character in a tawdry story. Beatrice's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Ah, you want elegant vengeance. The kind that isn't about inflicting pain, but about exposing truth. The kind that reestablishes balance by demonstrating your own unassailable strength. She leaned forward. History and literature are full of women who understood this. They didn't wield knives. They wielded information, social nuance, and impeccable timing. They turned their opponent's own vanity or greed or lies against them. The victory was not in the enemy's blood, but in their own reclaimed peace. Is that possible? I asked. The concept was a glimmer of light in the cold fog of my planning. It is the only kind worth having, she said firmly. Any other kind leaves splatter on your own clothes. Tell me, what is your first instinct? The cold, angry, useful one. I didn't hesitate. I want to know everything. I want a complete record. I want to understand the full scope of the lie, not to hurt myself with it, but to possess the reality of it. So he can never gaslight me, never minimize it. So I have the full measure of what I am walking away from. Beatrice nodded. Forensics, an excellent starting point. Knowledge is the foundation of power. Gather your evidence, but do it legally. Be meticulous. And remember, the goal is not to confront him with a scrapbook of his sins. The goal is for you to know absolutely, so that when you act from a place of certainty, not emotion. She picked up her tea again. He will expect tears or rage or negotiation. He will not expect a quiet, systematic dismantling of the life he took for granted. That will unnerve him more than any scene. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain. The herbal tea was soothing. The weight in my chest felt different here. It was still present, but it was no longer mine alone to carry. Beatrice's quiet understanding shared the load. What do I do with the knowledge once I have it? I asked finally. You let it inform your strategy, she said. You use it to make moves he cannot predict. You change the narrative from the poor, wronged wife to the formidable woman who calmly extracted herself from a bad bargain. Your revenge, Elise, will be a life lived well on your own terms. But the path to that life, it can include certain corrections. Certain revelations made at precisely the right moment to precisely the right people. I finished my tea. The cold, functional clarity I had woken up with was now warming into something else, a sense of purpose. The sadness was still there, a deep, quiet pool, but beside it now was a focused determination. I was not just surviving, I was planning. Thank you, Beatrice, I said, standing. For what? The tea is free, she said, waving a hand, but her eyes were serious. Remember, my dear, the most powerful response to a blow is not to stagger, but to straighten your spine, adjust your crown, and walk in a new direction. Let him watch you go. I let myself out, the owl knocker clicking softly behind me. The rain had lightened to a drizzle. I walked back to my apartment, but the sterile silence of it no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a blank page. I had a mentor, a philosophy, and a plan. The first phase was clear: gather the facts. The fortification of books had given me the blueprint for a different kind of fortress, one made of truth and resolve. The lock clicked with a new, definitive sound as I entered my apartment. The locksmith had come and gone. The wall of boxes was still there, a silent monument to the departed. I hung my coat and went straight to my office. Beatrice's words, "Forensics and knowledge is the foundation of power," were a clear directive. The cold anger was now a tool, and I was ready to use it. I started with the simplest, most accessible data, our joint credit card statements. Marcus handled most of our finances, a task he'd insisted on as more efficient. I had agreed, a decision I now saw as a strategic surrender of oversight. I logged into the online portal. The password was one I had changed that morning. I navigated to the statements for the last 6 months. I opened a spreadsheet on my second monitor. I created columns: date, merchant, amount, notes. I began scanning. The routine charges were there: utilities, groceries, his dry cleaning. Then I found the first anomaly: a charge from the opulent bistro, $87 on a Tuesday evening 6 weeks ago. Marcus had told me he was working late on a client proposal. I highlighted the row in yellow and noted the date. I continued. Another charge from the same bistro 2 weeks later, $112, a Thursday. I had been at a client meeting that night myself. I highlighted it. Then, a charge for a boutique hotel in the city, the Viridian, for a Saturday night in January. The business trip to Napa. I had video called him that evening. His background had been a generic hotel room. He had said he was exhausted from Vineyard Tour. The charge was $460. I highlighted it in red. My hands were steady on the keyboard. I felt no sharp pain, only a deepening chill. This was archaeology. I was uncovering the fossilized remains of my husband's secret life. Next, I accessed our shared phone account. We had a family plan that included location sharing for safety. Marcus had suggested it years ago. I had rarely used the feature. Now, I navigated to the location history for his device. The data was stored for 30 days. I selected dates from the last month and exported the log. Cross-referencing this with my spreadsheet was illuminating. On the days of the bistro charges, his phone's location had pinged in that neighborhood from 7 p.m. until after 11 p.m., not at his office. On the night of the Viridian Hotel charge, his phone had been stationary in the city's downtown district, not in Napa Valley. I added these coordinates to my notes. The digital trail was clear, but I needed context. Social media. I did not have passwords for his accounts, nor did I want them. That felt like a violation of a different order. Instead, I looked at what was publicly available. Chloe's Instagram profile was not private. I opened it. Her feed was a curated display of aspirational living, artisanal coffee, designer handbags, sunsets from rooftop bars. I scrolled back through months of posts. There were no pictures of Marcus, of course, but there were clues. A photo of a chocolate torte 3 months ago, captioned *decadence with my favorite dessert enabler. The plate was unmistakably from the opulent bistro. A picture from a wonderful weekend getaway in January, showing a stylish hotel robe and a view of the city skyline that matched the Viridian's signature vantage point. The date aligned. Then I saw it. A photo from 8 weeks ago, a group shot from what looked like a firm happy hour. Marcus was in the background, slightly blurred, talking to someone off camera. But his body was angled toward Chloe, who was in the foreground. His posture was the same relaxed, attentive lean I had seen at the bistro. The look on his face was familiar. It was the version of him I missed. The caption read, "Teamwork makes the dream work, office family grind." I took a screenshot. I added it to a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence. I felt a distant, clinical disgust at her hashtag. The final piece was communication. I had no access to his texts or emails, and I would not try to get it. That was for legal discovery, if necessary, but I had my own phone. I opened my text thread with Marcus. I searched for keywords. Late, working, dinner, client. I compiled a list of the dates and times he had given me these excuses. I then cross-checked them against the credit card charges and location data. The correlation was nearly perfect. By the time the evening light had faded from my window, my spreadsheet was a detailed, color-coded map of deception. It chronicled at least 14 distinct meetings over 6 months, 2 overnight stays, and hundreds of dollars spent on winning and dining his junior associate. The affair was not a lapse or a mistake. It was a sustained, parallel relationship funded by our joint account and built on a foundation of lies to me. I leaned back in my chair. The cold anger had crystallized into something hard and brilliant, like a diamond formed under pressure. I was not devastated by the details. I was empowered by them. He could not lie to me about this. I possessed the facts. I opened my email and wrote to Alina Vance. I attached the spreadsheet and the supporting screenshots with a concise summary. Alina *. Please find attached a preliminary chronology of Marcus's activities, supported by financial and location data from our joint accounts. This establishes a pattern of deception and expenditure of marital assets. I believe this will be relevant for discovery and for establishing the context of the separation. I am continuing to organize relevant documentation. Elise asterisk. I hit send. The asterisk whoosh asterisk sound was satisfying. This was no longer just personal. It was legal. I printed a clean copy of the spreadsheet. I placed it in a simple black folder. I then took the 2 wedding rings from my jewelry box. I held them for a moment in my palm. They were just objects now, symbols of a contract that had been breached. I put them in a small, sealed envelope and wrote the date on it. I placed the envelope inside the folder. The digital ghosts had been given form. They were no longer haunting whispers. They were documented facts in a black folder on my desk. The next move was his. He would contact me eventually. He would want to talk, to explain, to negotiate. And when he did, I would be ready. Not with tears, but with the cold, irrefutable truth. The power had subtly, decisively begun to shift. The foundation for everything that was to come was now complete. 3 days after I sent the evidence to Alina, my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I had not spoken to Marcus since the night he left. I looked through the peephole. He stood there holding a large bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. Or rather, they had been my favorite. He looked tired, his face drawn. He was wearing a suit, but it lacked its usual crispness. I considered not answering, but Beatrice's words echoed. He will expect tears or rage or negotiation. He will not expect a quiet, systematic dismantling. I unlocked the door and opened it, but did not step aside. Elise, he said, his voice thick with contrition. The lilies trembled slightly in his grip. Can we talk, please? Just let me come in for 5 minutes. I looked at him, then at the flowers. I said nothing, but I stepped back, opening the door just wide enough for him to enter. He walked in, his eyes immediately going to the wall of boxes in the foyer. He flinched. He held out the bouquet. These are for you. I'm so sorry for everything. I took the lilies. Their scent was overpoweringly sweet. I carried them to the kitchen island and laid them down. I did not put them in water. I turned back to face him, leaning against the island. I crossed my arms. You have 5 minutes. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room like a guest who didn't know where to sit. He cleared his throat. I don't even know where to start. What I did, it was unconscionable. It was a weakness. A moment of stupidity that spiraled. Chloe means nothing to me. She never did. It was an ego thing, a mistake. You are my wife. You are everything. I am sick over what I've done to you, to us. His words were smooth, practiced. He was hitting every point. Admission of fault, minimization, reassurance of my primacy, expression of remorse. It was a performance. I watched him, my face neutral. I am willing to do anything, he continued, taking a tentative step forward. Counseling, a leave of absence from work. I'll cut all contact with her. I'll give you full transparency into my phone, my emails. Whatever you need to feel secure again. We can rebuild, Elise. We have 8 years of history. That has to count for something. He finished, his eyes pleading. The silence stretched out. I let it hang, let him feel the emptiness of his words in the sterile air of the apartment he no longer lived in. Are you finished? I asked, my voice calm. He blinked, wrong-footed. Yes, I just need you to know how truly sorry I am. I do know you're sorry, I said. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the waiter handed me a napkin. You're sorry your convenient double life has become inconvenient. I pushed off from the island and walked to the foyer. I picked up the business card I had placed on the console days ago. I then turned and gestured to the hardshell suitcase, still standing where I had left it the night he left. Your things are there. The rest, I said, nodding to the boxes, can be picked up by a service. I will provide a date and time. I walked back to him and held out Alina Vance's card. He stared at it, not taking it. Elise, don't do this. Let's talk about this like adults. We are, I said. This is the adult conversation. You had an affair. I am filing for divorce. This is the lawyer who will handle it. All future communication will go through her. I kept my arm extended. He ignored the card, his expression shifting from contrition to frustration. This is an overreaction. People make mistakes. You're throwing away our entire marriage over a fling. I lowered the card. My gaze was steady. A fling that lasted at least 6 months. A fling that included dinners at the opulent bistro on February 12th and March 5th. A fling that included a night at the Viridian Hotel on January 28th, not in Napa. A fling funded by our joint account to the tune of over $1,400 that I have documented. His mouth fell open. All the color drained from his face. The rehearsed lines evaporated. He looked truly stunned, then frightened. You've been spying on me. I reviewed our joint financial and phone records, I said, my tone factual. The data is clear. It's not a fling, Marcus. It's a second relationship. You made a choice. Repeatedly. Now I am making mine. The fear in his eyes hardened into a spark of anger. You had no right to go through those statements. They are joint statements, I corrected him. I had every right, just as you had the right to use our money to court your associate. The difference is, my actions were legal. Yours constitute dissipation of marital assets, which my lawyer is now aware of. The word lawyer seemed to finally penetrate. He looked at the card in my hand as if seeing it for the first time. The reality of the situation, the concrete, legal reality, crashed down on him. This was not a marital quarrel to be smoothed over. This was a contractual dissolution. He reached out slowly and took the card. His fingers brushed mine. They were cold. He read the name. Eleanor Vance, of course. You've been planning this. I've been prepared, I said. There's a difference. You prepared for a secret affair. I prepared for the possibility that my husband might betray me. It seems my preparation was warranted. He had no reply. He looked from the card to the suitcase, to the wilted lilies on the counter. The performance was over. The audience was unimpressed. The script was useless. He was just a man holding a lawyer's card in the home he was being ejected from. Take your suitcase, Marcus, I said, walking to the front door and opening it. The hallway was bright and empty. He stood frozen for another moment, then moved mechanically. He set the briefcase down, gripped the handle of the suitcase, and wheeled it toward the door. He paused on the threshold, just as he had before. He turned, his eyes searching my face for any crack, any hint of softening or regret. I met his gaze without expression. I held the door open, my posture straight, my other hand at my side. There was nothing more to say. He swallowed, gave a small, defeated nod, and stepped out. I closed the door. This time, I did not listen for his footsteps. I simply turned the new, firm deadbolt. I walked to the kitchen, picked up the lilies, and dropped them into the trash bin. The sweet smell was already cloying. I returned to my office. I opened a fresh document. At the top, I typed, Phase 1 complete. I allowed myself one small, cold breath of satisfaction. The confrontation was over. He knew I knew. He knew I had proof. He knew I had a lawyer. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. The penance had not been in his hollow apology, but in the quiet, devastating moment he realized his lies were transparent, his secrets were known, and his exit was permanent. The plates of our marriage were now cleanly, irrevocably broken. The empty suitcase by the door was a symbol that had served its purpose. The next morning, I placed it in the storage closet. The wall of boxes remained, a scheduled pickup now arranged through Eleanor's office. The apartment was clearing, not just of his things, but of the weight of his presence. My focus now shifted from the past to the future, from reaction to construction. The most potent part of my plan was not about him, but about me. It was time to legally and financially sever the ties and rebuild my foundation in my own name. My first appointment was with my financial advisor, David Chen. I had used his services for my freelance business for years, separate from the joint advisor Marcus preferred. David's office was calm and modern, with a view of the river. He stood as I entered. "Elise, good to see you," he said, his expression professional but warm. We exchanged brief pleasantries before I got to the point. "David, I am getting a divorce. I need to review every account, investment, and beneficiary designation I have. I want to ensure everything is solely in my control and reflects my current wishes." He nodded, his demeanor shifting to one of focused efficiency. "Of course, let's start with the portfolio you hold with us." He turned his monitor so I could see. We went through each line: retirement accounts, investment funds, a small annuity. On every one, Marcus was listed as the primary beneficiary, a standard practice for a spouse. Seeing his name there next to mine felt like a relic from a bygone era. I want to remove him from all of them, I said. Effective immediately. Do you wish to name a new beneficiary? David asked. I considered. My mother was financially secure. I had no children. For now, list my estate as the beneficiary. I will update it at a later date. David made the changes, his keyboard clicks sounding like tiny bolts being thrown. You'll need to sign these updated forms. He printed them out. I took the pen he offered, a solid, weighty instrument, and signed my name on each line. The scratch of the pen was definitive. With each signature, a financial tether was cut. Next, we reviewed my business accounts. They were already separate, but I instructed David to ensure all automatic transfers or links to any joint holding account were terminated. I changed the authorization protocols so only my signature was valid. We set up new, stringent alerts for any account activity. I was building a fortress around my livelihood. The last thing, I said, is a wire transfer. I want to make a charitable donation. I gave him the name of the women's shelter downtown, the one Beatrice had once mentioned supporting. I specified the amount, a significant sum enough to make a real difference. It is to be anonymous. The donor should be listed as E. Sterling, my maiden name. It felt right to use it. David processed the instructions without comment. The transaction receipt printed. I looked at the confirmation number, the name of the shelter, the amount. This money, earned through my own work, would now do tangible good. It was the opposite of what Marcus had done with our joint funds. It was a reclamation, not a dissipation. My next stop was Alina Vance's office. It was in an older building with solid oak doors and hushed corridors. Alina was a woman in her 60s with a sleek gray bob and eyes that missed nothing. She did not offer sympathy. She offered competence. The financial discovery you provided was excellent, she said, gesturing for me to sit. It gives us a very strong position. I've drafted the initial petition for dissolution. She slid a document across the desk. It was thick. It cites irreconcilable differences. Given the prenuptial agreement, the asset division is straightforward. His counsel will likely try to negotiate spousal support, but given the short duration of the marriage relative to your both being high earners, and the evidence of his misconduct, I believe we can successfully argue against it. I read through the first few pages. The legal language was cold and precise. It reduced 8 years of shared life to clauses on property, accounts, and mutual releases from future claims. It was exactly what I needed. What about the timeline? I asked. If he agrees to the terms as outlined, we could have a judgment in as little as 60 days. If he contests, it will be longer, but the prenup limits his avenues. My recommendation is to file this now. It shows you are serious and expedites the process. File it, I said without hesitation. Alina picked up her pen. I'll need your signature here and here. I signed where she indicated, the same decisive stroke I had used in David's office. Consider yourself officially on the path to being unmarried, she said, a hint of dry satisfaction in her voice. I will serve him the papers today. I left her office feeling a profound sense of forward motion. The machinery of the law was now engaged. My role was to let it run its course while I built my new life around it. That evening, I did not work. I cooked a simple meal for myself. I set the table for one. I ate slowly, tasting the food. After, I opened my laptop and drafted a short professional email. I sent it to my current and past clients and to my professional network. Dear all asterisk, I am writing to share that I will be transitioning my freelance design practice to a new, independent studio. All current projects and contact information will remain unchanged. I look forward to continuing our work together under this new chapter. Best asterisk, Elise Sterling. I attached a new, clean logo I had designed for myself years ago and never used. It was simple, strong, just my initials in a custom typeface. I hit send. The responses began to trickle in almost immediately. Notes of congratulations, expressions of continued support. The professional world, at least, saw not a woman crumbling, but a woman building something new. Their perception was a tool I could use. I closed my laptop, The apartment was quiet, but the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the echoes of actions taken, the scratch of pens, the click of keys, the silent transfer of funds to a good cause. I had changed the beneficiaries. I had changed the locks. I was changing the narrative. Every signed document, every updated account was a brick in the new foundation. The penance was over. The construction had begun. The congratulatory emails on my new studio were still arriving when the invitation came. A high-profile charity gala for the city's Arts Foundation, an event Marcus and I had attended together for the past 5 years. Our tickets were usually procured through his firm's sponsorship. I assumed my name had been purged from the list, but the thick, cream-colored envelope was addressed solely to Ms. Elise Sterling. A note was paperclipped inside from the event chair, a former client of mine. Heard about your new venture, would be delighted to have you join us. A table has been reserved in your name. It was not an invitation, it was a test, a public one. I accepted, not for the charity, though it was a worthy cause. I accepted because it was time to leave the fortress. It was time to be seen. The night of the gala, I dressed with deliberate care. I chose a gown I had bought for myself the year before, a column of deep emerald green silk that Marcus had deemed too severe. It was simple, elegant, and it made my brown skin glow. I wore my hair down in its natural curls. My only jewelry was the plain platinum band and small diamond studs. I looked at my reflection. I did not see a wounded wife. I saw a woman in control. The serenity was not a pretense. It was the result of completed paperwork, changed beneficiaries, and a plan in motion. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the historic Rutherford Hotel. Crystal chandeliers blazed. The air buzzed with conversation and the clink of glasses. I handed my coat to the attendant and entered alone. I felt the eyes. A woman alone at such an event was a subject of speculation. A woman recently separated from a partner at a prestigious firm was a magnet for gossip. I kept my chin level, a small, composed smile on my lips. I did not scan the crowd for him. I moved toward the bar and ordered a mineral water. I saw them before they saw me. They were near the silent auction tables. Marcus looked stiff in his tuxedo. Chloe clung to his arm, wearing a ruffled pink gown that seemed designed for a much younger woman. She was smiling too brightly, her eyes darting around as if seeking approval. Marcus's posture was all wrong, tense, his shoulders hunched slightly. He was not enjoying his victory lap. He was enduring it. I turned away and began to circulate. I greeted the event chair, thanking her for the invitation. I spoke with the director of the Community Arts Center, discussing a potential pro bono branding project. I was photographed laughing with the city's deputy mayor, an old college acquaintance. Each interaction was brief, warm, and professional. I was building a new network right in front of the old one. I could feel Marcus's gaze from across the room. It was a physical pressure on my back. I did not acknowledge it. I continued my circuit, a slow, graceful orbit that brought me, inevitably, closer to their position. It was Chloe who broke first. I was examining a piece in the auction, a bold, abstract painting, when I heard her voice, pitched high with false warmth. "Elise, is that you?" I turned. She stood a few feet away, Marcus just behind her shoulder. His face was pale, his expression rigid. Up close, I could see the strain around his eyes, the tight set of his jaw. Chloe's smile was brittle. "Chloe, Marcus," I said, my tone polite, the tone one uses with vague acquaintances. "Good evening." "You look well," Marcus said, the words sounding forced. "Thank you, so do you." My gaze lingered on him for only a second before returning to Chloe. "That's a lovely color on you." The comment was neutral, devoid of any real compliment. Chloe's smile flickered. "Oh, thank you, it's so brave of you to come tonight. Alone, I mean." "Not brave," I corrected gently. "Pleasant. The Arts Foundation does important work. It's a cause I'm happy to support." I shifted my attention back to Marcus. "Eleanor tells me you've received the paperwork. I trust everything is clear." I said it as if discussing a routine business matter. He flinched. In this crowded, glittering room, I had just referenced our divorce. Chloe's hand tightened on his arm. "Yes," he managed to say. "My counsel is reviewing it." "Excellent, efficient process benefits everyone." I gave a small, polite nod. "Well, enjoy your evening." I began to turn away. "Elise, wait," Marcus said, a low, urgent note in his voice. He took half a step forward. I paused, looking back over my shoulder, one eyebrow slightly raised. A silent question. "Yes." He seemed to choke on whatever he wanted to say. The apology, the plea, it died in his throat under the weight of the chandelier light and the watching crowd. He saw my composure, my absolute lack of need for anything from him. My serenity was a wall he could not scale. "Nothing," he muttered, looking down. I nodded again, as if dismissing a minor servant, and moved away. I joined a group near the stage where the managing partner of Marcus's firm was holding court with his wife. The partner's wife, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, touched my arm. "Elise, darling, I heard about your new studio. Brilliant move. We must have lunch soon." Her approval was a social shield, publicly offered. I smiled, accepting it. For the rest of the evening, I was a portrait of calm engagement. I danced once with the deputy mayor. I placed a bid on the abstract painting. I never looked toward Marcus and Chloe again, but I was aware of them as a tense, unhappy knot in the periphery. The photograph that appeared in the society column the next day captured it perfectly. I was in the foreground, head thrown back in a genuine laugh, radiant and at ease. In the blurry background, barely in focus, Marcus and Chloe stood, their faces turned toward each other, but not smiling. They looked like strangers arguing at a bus stop. I left the gala early. As I collected my coat, I felt no triumph, only a deep and quiet satisfaction. The confrontation I had engineered was not a scene. It was a demonstration. I had shown him and their entire social circle that I was not broken. I was not hiding. I was thriving. My revenge was not in a whispered insult, but in the devastating clarity of that polite, distant nod. He had expected a ghost or a fury. He had encountered a sovereign state, diplomatically recognizing his existence, but offering no terms of engagement. The portrait of serenity was complete, and it had already been hung in the gallery of public opinion. My narrative was now the only one that mattered. The morning after the gala, I did not read the society column. I did not need to. I had felt the shift in the room, seen it in the averted glances of Marcus's colleagues and the pointed warmth directed at me. The public test was passed. Now it was time for the private execution, the final surgical cuts. Elinor's email arrived at 10 a.m. The subject line read, "Final judgment, Sterling Thorne." I opened the attachment. It was the divorce decree signed by a judge. The marriage was legally dissolved. All terms of the prenuptial agreement were upheld. The apartment was mine. My assets remained mine. His remained his. There was no spousal support in either direction. It was a clean, swift, and total severance. It was over. I printed a single copy. I looked at the judge's signature, the court seal. It was just a piece of paper, but it represented the end of an 8-year contract. I felt a quiet, hollow echo, not of loss, but of finality. The heavy stone in my chest had been gradually ground down to sand, and now it settled. I had prepared for this moment. I opened a new email window. I would send 3 messages. Each was calibrated for a specific audience. Each was a key component of the elegant vengeance Beatrice had envisioned. The first was to Marcus. I attached the PDF of the signed divorce decree. In the body, I wrote only, "Marcus **. Attached is the final judgment. All matters are now concluded. Per the agreement, your remaining personal effects will be available for pickup by a service this Friday from 9 a.m. to 11. The superintendent will grant access. Future correspondence should be directed to Elinor Vance." Elise **. No sentiment, no recrimination, just administrative facts. He would be expecting a motion, some last barb. He would receive a closing statement. I saved it as a draft. The second email was for Chloe. I did not have her personal email, but I had her work address. It was easy to find. I opened a new message. I did not write a subject line. In the body, I did not write a single word. Instead, I attached a file, a scanned image of the final page of the divorce decree, the one with Marcus's signature beside the judge's. I had highlighted his signature in yellow. Below the attached image, I wrote only this caption: "He always chooses himself. You were just a dessert." I blind carbon copied the email to her. She would receive it, see the attachment, and have no idea who else might have seen it. The paranoia would be part of the message. I saved this draft as well. The third email was for our shared professional world. It was the email I had sent weeks ago about my new studio, but this was an update, a closing of the loop. I drafted a new message to my entire professional contact list, which included partners at Marcus's firm, mutual acquaintances, and all my clients. Dear friends and colleagues, I am pleased to share that Sterling Design Studio is now officially open for business. I have relocated to a new, dedicated workspace at the address below. Thank you for your continued support. Warmly, Elise Sterling, Principal, Sterling Design Studio. Below my name, I inserted the new studio logo and the address of a co-working space in the arts district I had secured the week before. It was not my home. It was a professional forward operating base. This email was not about the past. It was a definitive announcement of a future that excluded Marcus Thorne entirely. It reframed the narrative from Elise is getting divorced to Elise is launching her successful studio. I sat back, I reviewed each email. They were perfect, cold, clear, and devastating in their precision. The first delivered the legal finality. The second delivered the emotional truth. The third delivered the new reality. My finger hovered over the trackpad. This was the point of no return. This was the controlled detonation. I felt a calm so deep it was like stillness at the bottom of an ocean. I had grieved. I had planned. I had gathered evidence and changed beneficiaries and stood serene at a gala. This was the culmination. I clicked send on the first email to Marcus. The asterisk whoosh asterisk sound was soft. I clicked send on the second email to Chloe. Another whoosh. Finally, I clicked send on the third email to my network. A final asterisk whoosh asterisk. I closed my laptop. The sound of the lid shutting was a period at the end of a very long sentence. I stood up and walked to the window. The morning sun was bright. I imagined Marcus opening his email, seeing the decree, understanding there were no more negotiations, no more chances. I imagined Chloe opening hers, the confusion, then the dawning horror as she saw his signature, read the caption, realized she had been a pawn in a game she didn't understand, and that the game was over. I imagined my professional contacts receiving the studio announcement, some knowing the context, some not, but all receiving the same message. Elise Sterling is moving forward. There was no loud crash, no dramatic scene. The unveiling was silent, digital, and absolute. The revenge was not in causing pain, but in revealing the truth and then stepping away from the wreckage, whole and intact. I had exposed the affair with a napkin. I had exposed his lies with a spreadsheet. And now I had exposed the futility of it all with 3 emails and a change of address. The apartment was quiet. The boxes were gone. The space was truly mine. I felt the quiet echo again, but this time it was not hollow. It was the sound of an empty room ready to be filled with new things. My work was done. The elegant vengeance was complete. All that remained was to live in the peace I had carved out for myself. The weeks after the emails sent themselves passed with a new rhythm. The frantic energy of planning and execution settled into a steady, purposeful hum. The apartment no longer felt like a stage set or a fortress. It felt like a home. My home. I had rearranged the furniture, donated the uncomfortable chaise, and hung the abstract painting I'd won at the gala auction. It was bold and colorful, a complete departure from the muted tones Marcus preferred. My new studio space was in a renovated warehouse in the arts district. It was a single, sun-drenched room with exposed brick and large windows. I kept it minimalist: a large desk, a drafting table, my computer, and shelves for materials. The Sterling Design Studio plaque on the door was simple and understated. The work that came in was more varied and interesting than before. Clients sought me out for my aesthetic, not as an extension of my husband's professional network. One morning, I was finalizing a brand guide for the Community Arts Center. I had taken on the pro bono project as promised. The director had suggested I meet their new programming coordinator to discuss the event calendar visuals. The meeting was set for their on-site cafe. I arrived a few minutes early. The Arts Center was a lively, welcoming space, full of natural light and the quiet sounds of creativity, the whir of a pottery wheel, a pianist practicing in a distant room. I ordered a coffee at the cafe counter and turned to find a seat. Elise. I recognized the voice before I saw the face. It was Gabriel, the waiter from the opulent bistro. He was not in a server's uniform. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, and he held a tablet in his hand. He looked different, more relaxed, but his eyes still held that same perceptive kindness. "Gabriel," I said, genuinely surprised. "Hello." "I work here now," he said, gesturing around. "I'm the new programming coordinator. I left the bistro a few weeks after. "I'm glad," I said, and I was. "This seems like a much better fit." He nodded. "It is. I heard you were doing our rebrand. It's an honor." He paused, his expression turning slightly more serious. "I also heard, through the neighborhood grapevine, about your divorce. I hope the note wasn't the cause of too much pain." I shook my head. The note was the gift of truth. The pain was already there, waiting to be discovered. You handed me the key to the lock. It allowed me to deal with reality, not a lie. For that, I will always be thankful. He smiled, a relieved, warm smile. I was worried I'd overstepped. "You acted on your conscience. That is rare." I lifted my coffee cup slightly in a small toast. "To better places." "To better places," he echoed. Our meeting then shifted smoothly to the work at hand. We discussed color palettes and typography for upcoming workshops. He had good, insightful ideas. It was a clean, professional interaction, devoid of the heavy subtext of our first meeting. A chapter had closed, and a new, milder connection had formed. Later that week, I brought a slice of flourless chocolate cake from a new bakery to Beatrice. Her door, with its owl knocker, was always open to me. "The student has surpassed the master," she declared after I told her about the studio, the Arts Center project, and my brief, peaceful encounter with Gabriel. She cut the cake with precision. "Elegant vengeance achieved. You exposed the truth, reclaimed your narrative, and built a better life. No splatter on your clothes." "There was never any splatter," I said. "Just careful cleaning up." "Precisely." She took a bite of cake, closing her eyes in appreciation. "And him, any more theatrics?" I had heard snippets, inevitably. Marcus had been passed over for an expected promotion. The official reason was strategic realignment, but the gossip in his firm pointed to the personal conduct clause invoked after the divorce details, however discreet, became known to the senior partners. Chloe had transferred to a different office in another city shortly after the email. The caption had apparently hit its mark. I relayed none of this to Beatrice in detail. "He is facing the consequences of his choices," I said simply. "That is no longer my concern." "The perfect answer," Beatrice said. "Your concern is this excellent cake and your next project. You have reached the morning light portion of the story, my dear. It is the most rewarding chapter to write." That evening, I worked late in my studio. The city lights began to wink on outside my windows. I was sketching, not for a client, but for myself. A pattern of interlocking lines, inspired by the ironwork of Beatrice's balcony. It was going nowhere in particular. It was just an exercise in pleasure. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert for the next day. A call with a new client, a museum. Another email notification popped up. A thank you note from the women's shelter, signed by the director, for the transformative generosity of E. Sterling. I smiled and swiped it away. I put my pencil down and stretched. The studio was quiet. The hum of the building's ventilation was a soft white noise. I looked around at the space I had built. It was mine. Every choice, every object reflected my taste, my work, my peace. The revenge was complete, but it felt like a distant event, a necessary storm that had cleared the air. What remained was not triumph, but contentment. Not a burning desire for his downfall, but a profound appreciation for my own freedom. The waiter had handed me a napkin, and that single act of kindness had set in motion not a destruction, but a reclamation. I had taken the shattered pieces of the life I thought I had and used them to build a new foundation, stronger and truer. I turned off the desk lamp, leaving only the ambient glow from the city. I locked the studio door behind me. The hallway was quiet. I walked out into the cool evening, the sound of my own footsteps a steady, confident rhythm on the pavement. I was going home. To my home. The next chapter was already beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I was eager to see what was on the next page. It was blank, and it was all mine.